Welcome everyone as we learn Torah Hashem, Be'ezras Hashem Yisbarach, as we broadcast here from my summer cottage in Elm Shade Estate, South Fallsburg. As always, we give credit to TorahAnytime.com for its magnificent worldwide platform teaching Torah in well over 100 countries. Equally, we show gratitude to Kol HaLashon for its global network, and to those that watch on YouTube, to my Zoomers, to my subscribers, to those that listen on Torah Communications Network. Thank you all for joining us. Tonight we have two sponsors in order of how they were received. Our first sponsor is Heshi Rubin for Le'ili Nishmas, his sister, who passed away at the tender age of 34 years ago. Mattos bas Rabbi Chil Michal HaKayin. Her neshama should have a lichtige Gan Eden. She was a giver. She had a Shem Tov. She should be Militzi Yashar for her family, for all of us, and all of Klal Yisrael. We were also sponsored by my dear Talmud, Mr. and Mrs. Shimon Klein, Le'ili Nishmas Shimon's mother, Gittel Bas Shimon Pinchas, whose yahrzeit is Daladov, the day after my father's yahrzeit. The Shama should have an Aliyah. She should be a Militzi Yashara for her family, for all of us, and all of Klal Yisrael. Ves Bilam ben Ba'ar Horgu B'charav. We know that Moshe Rabbeinu delegated to Pinchas, who took 1,000 men from 12 Shvatim, and he not only venged the vengeance of Klal Yisrael against Midian, but Bilam ben Ba'ar was killed b'charav, by the sword. So the Sefer Shnai Mikra asks a technical question. Normally, when the Torah says that we killed by the sword, the lashon is always lefi charav, by the mouth of the sword. For example, when Shimon and Levi killed the city of Shechem for what they did to Dinah, it says ve'es Chamor ve'es Shechem b'nai, and Chamor and Shechem his son, hargu lefi charav, by the mouth of the sword. When they did Amalek, it says vayachal Yeshua es Amalek ve'es Amai lefi charav. Also by Sichon, it says by Sichon v'yakeyu lefi charav. So always the lashon is lefi charav. So how come over here by Bilam it doesn't say lefi charav? It says as Bilam ben Ba'ar hargu b'charav. Now, you know, these kind of diyukim, it's only worth as good as the pshat. But there's a very good pshat. The Sefer Teitzei Torah says a meridik pshat. He says normally the language of lefi charav is the mouth that accompanies the sword. Because we know that Klal Yisrael doesn't do battle with a sword. Klal Yisrael, Yodayim Yodei Esav. The hands are the way of Esav. Hakel Kel Yaakov. And therefore, when Yaakov said that I will give Yosef an extra portion that I took, B'charbi u'b'kashti, with my sword and my bow, the Targum says it's b'tzloisi u'b'usi, with my prayers and my petitions. Because Klal Yisrael doesn't do battle with the sword, they do battle with their mouth. So when it says, the Sichain by Amalek, by Shechem and Chamor, it says, Lefi Chorev, by the mouth of the sword. It means the tefillah that accompanies the sword. And that's the way of Klal. We know, we say it every day in davening before Volitzion. Eila v'recha ve'eila v'asusim. They come with chariots, they come with cavalry. V'anachnu b'shem Hashem Elokeinu na'askir. We do battle by mentioning Hashem Elokeinu. So by us it's Lefi Chorev, the mouth of the sword. I told you that the six-sided star of David, which we call the Magen David, right? It's the emblem of David HaMelech. That stands for Echad L'Mala ve'Echad L'Mata and Arba Ruchos, above, below, and four directions. That's where we daven. We daven to the one who is above, below, and in four directions. So that's Lefi Chorev, the mouth of the sword. But Bilam was different. Because what does Rashi say? Why was Bilam killed with the sword? Because Hu Baal Yisrael v'hichlif umnosai be'emunasam. He switched his way with our way. Because the guy, al-char b'chasichya, he lives by the sword. But Bilam came to curse us. Right? He came, so he took our umnus. Remember that Balak asked the Ziknei Midian that the leader of these people grew up in Midian. Ma tivai, what makes him tick? So the Midianite said, Einum nosan shel elu ela b'feh. Their craft is the mouth. So therefore he hired Bilam to use the mouth. So Bilam usurped our modality, and therefore Mida Keneged Mida, we killed him with their modality. So here it was literally Bilam ben Ba'ar Horgu B'charev, killed by the sword. Now it's interesting. Einum nosan shel elu ela b'feh. The craft of Klal Yisrael is the mouth. That's our profession. That's our specialty. We're specialists. Now what does that mean? So, the Gemara says in Chulin, Peites Amar Aleph, Amar Reb Yitzchak, Ma umnosai shel adam ba'olam hazeh. What's the profession of a person in this world? Now when you hear that, it's a strange question. What do you mean, what's the profession? Depends who you are. I'm a rabbi. Yisrael Fisher is an accountant. Shelley Zeitlin works in social services. Yeshua Shmuel Eismer is a rabbi. Dr. Guy is a doctor. What do you mean, Ma'am Nasi Shel Adam Ba'elam Hazeh? Rabbi Yitzchak says, there's a craft, there's a profession that we all have to have. Yeah, we all have to have this specialty. Ma'am Nasi Shel Adam Ba'elam Hazeh Yaseh Atzmoi Ke'ilain. He has to know how to keep his mouth shut. He has to know to make himself like a mute. Invariably, especially in marriage, there will be times when your spouse will say something improper. We're not malachim. It only becomes a fight when you respond. As the Welt says, it takes two to tango. Tango is a dance. You can't do a tango solo. You need a partner. So it takes two to tango. And if you're not going to have a partner, you can't have a fight. So a person has to learn this profession, how to keep his mouth shut. So it's interesting that when most people think about, when it says, Ein umnis shel elu ela befeh, most people think it means that a person knows how to daven, that a person knows how to learn, and that, of course, is included in this being a specialist with the mouth. But Rabbi Yitzchak tells us that the specialty of the mouth is to be a professional, to know how to keep your mouth shut. Now, what does this mean? So, the simple meaning of this, of being a doctor of the mouth. You're a doctor, you have a PhD in the mouth. So the Bapashtis, that means that you worked on not needing to have the last word. Most people, if they're not accomplished at this profession, they need to have the last word. They don't know how to let go. They have the last word. Most people, even smart people, if they didn't work on this, if they're not a professional, by the way, we know that there are people that keep the world going. There are people that keep the world going. I mean, we know from the Rav David Feinstein's, the Rav Yashiv. We know people like that. But there's another cadre, another collection of people that keep the world going. The Gemara tells us, Toile Eretz al Belima. Now literally this means the world was suspended on nothingness. The world is suspended. If you look in a telescope, you'll see the heavy globe is standing in the air. There's no pedestal. It's not being held. It's not being anchored. It's suspended on nothingness. Okay, we know gravitational pulls and everything. But it looks to the observer, Tola Eretz al Blima. The world is suspended on Blima, on nothing. But the Gemara says that there's another meaning to this pasuk. Eina olam miskayim ela b'mi sheboilim piv b'shas meriva. The world only is in existence because of those savvy, trained people that know how to keep their mouth shut at a time of a quarrel. This, by the way, if you think you could do this without working on it, you're denying this Gemara. Because the Gemara says it's an umnus. It has to be worked on. One of the ways to work on it is to remember when you didn't do it. To remember a ruined weekend or a ruined night because you didn't keep your mouth shut. You didn't keep your mouth shut, so it mushroomed into a whole Chad Gadya. That's an umnus. It's a special umnus. However, the Gra, the Vilna Gaon, the Vilna Gaon says something else. He says What's the connection between an umnus and shtika? An umnus and being quiet. He says it's not readily understandable. What is the connection? So the Gaon says, and it's a Sefer Chasidim. Sefer Chasidim in Tov Samach Gimel says that a person, just like they have a given amount of years, and then there's the Kates, then it's over, they're also given a specific amount of words. And when they use up the words, they die. Let me read you the lashon of the Sefer Hasidim. This is the same Sefer Hasidim that we don't cut down fruit trees. The same Sefer Hasidim that we don't close up a window. We have to leave a pinhole. Says the Sefer Hasidim, Al yargel odam ledaber dvarim betelim. Don't speak idle chatter. Ki kol odam yesh loy kotzev misper advarim ledaber b'chayev. Because every person has a fixed amount of words to speak. V'kol zman shemedaber advarim, and whenever he plepels, mikatzrin lo yoimav, it shortens his days. Nimsa Shem Yirbu B'dvarim B'Telim, if he says a lot of nonsense, Yamato Yoma Vishnoisav, he's lessening his days and his years. So therefore says the Gaon, it's mamish, Ma'um Nosei Shalodam Elam Hazeh, on umnis is a livelihood. You have to have a parnasa to live. So he says another way to make sure that you live is yasa atzma ki'ilei, is to make yourself like a mute. Because if a person wastes words, he's giving away his lifeblood. Now, of course, this doesn't apply to learning Torah. To the contrary, the Sfas Emes says that learning Torah not only doesn't come off the cheshbon, but it adds to the cheshbon. It adds words. Tzedek tedaberu. We'll get there. And by the way, this is the Pashut Pshat. Now we know the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Shimon benai Yaimer kol yomai gadalti ben hachachamim. All my days I grew up amongst the sages. V'lo matzasi leguf toiv mishtika. I didn't find anything better than a shtika. Because shtika is a life preserver. Person says meaningless chatter, it wastes away his life. And this idea that the umnus is the ability to control the mouth. That's what it says. Tzadikim ne'lovin ve'enon olvin. They're insulted, they don't insult back. Shaimim cherpasan v'shoiskin. They hear their insult and they're quiet. It's not an easy thing to do. Not an easy thing to do. Somebody comes over and says, Weiss, you don't know what you're doing. It's not easy to be quiet. You got to be an uman. So although Rav Miller, when he refers to the Mishnah of Kol Yomai Gadalti Ben HaChacham V'lo Matzasi L'Guf Tov Mishtika, he says a person that's quiet saves himself from heart attacks, he saves himself from high blood pressure. It's good for the guf. But here what the Gaon is saying from the Sefer Hasidim is it's literally saving days and years, because you're not using up your words. That's what the Gemara says in Megillah, Mila b'sela, shtika b'trei. If a word is worth a selah, then quiet is worth 2 slime. Because when he says a word, it's costing him life. When he's quiet, he's saving his life. That's what the Medrash says. V'dibarta bam, v'loi b'dvarim b'teilim. Every day we say in Kriya Shema, v'dibarta bam, speak about the Torah. Not dvarim b'teilim, dvarim b'teilim, cause. Now, we're not talking about, I don't want somebody to listen to this and say, you know what, I'm not talking to my spouse. We're not talking about words of mitzvah. Man comes home, his wife is lonely. His wife is looking for companionship. Those are words of mitzvah. Those are words dripping with honey. Hashem loves those words. We're talking about waste. And of course, it's going to cost life, lashon hara, and all the other stuff. Now, this is also the very, very, I've said this, Talmidim of mine heard from me this, although I always say it with a waiver that I don't have enough knowledge to make such a statement. But in my limited knowledge of Agadah in Shas, one of the most important Agadatas in Shas is found in Sanhedrin Tzadik Tes Amud Beis. In Sanhedrin Tzadik Tes Amud Beis, it says, Adam la'amal yulad. A man was created for toil. This world isn't just a big amusement park. A man was created to toil. But any idea im la'amal malacha nivra or la'amal pen nivra? What's the greatest arena of achievement? Is it visiting the sick and building a sukkah and eating matzah? Or la'amal pen nivra? Or is it the toil of the mouth? And the Gemara quotes a pasuk, Kishu Aimar ki ochaf olav piyu. You should have a saddle upon your mouth. Have a Aimer la'amal pen nivra. Now again, the language of a saddle on the mouth, that language, the saddle helps you control the horse. A person has to have a saddle on his mouth. That means that the greatest achievement of life is to control the mouth, to have a saddle on the mouth. However, the Gemara then says that the greatest amal peh is to learn Torah. Like it says, Lo yomish sefer ha-Torah hazeh mepicha, the Torah shouldn't budge from your mouth. And it's interesting that the Mefarshim say that in the pasuk quoted from Eov, Ki ochaf olav piyu, both the word ochaf, aleph, chaf, and the fei, and the word piyu, both have gematria of 101. Ochaf, aleph is 1, chaf is 20, pei is 80, that's 101. And piyu is also 101. Pei is 80, Yud is 10, is 90, and Hey and Vav is 11, it's 101. Because that's the job, to learn the Gemara 101 times. That's the mouth. That's Ki ochaf olav piyu. It's nice to see my mother joining us. Welcome, Mommy. And that's what it says. You know, the wife of Rameya, Bruria, once corrected a Torah student when she saw him learning and not saying the words. And she chastised him. You're supposed to say the words, Chayim heim l'moitze'ehem. It is life for those that find it. The Gemara says, Al tikrei l'moitze'ehem, ela l'motzi'ehem b'feh. Say the words with your mouth. Because when you say the words, like the Sfas Emes says, it has life, it adds words to our life. It adds to our life. That's what it says. Now we understand a little bit deeper. Remember, I always told you that on the words that Hashem created man, l'nefesh chaya, for a spirit of life, the Targum says, l'ruach memalala, a spirit that speaks. Our speaking is a life force. When we waste with idle words, especially hurtful words, and words that are not truthful, we're using up our life force. When we learn, we're gaining life force. Ki chayim eim l'moitziayim b'feh. I want to tell you a story of the idea of having control of the mouth. It's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful story. Rav Moshe Schwab was the famed mashgiach of Gateshead in the UK. And one time, maybe it was a Friday night, maybe it was a Purim, the Bachram asked their Rebbe, how did you get started? He was a famous mashgiach with thousands of Talmidim over the years. Rebbe, how did you get started? So he told them, he says, you know, my older brother was going to yeshiva in Baranovich. He was going to go to the famed yeshiva of Rav Elchanan Wasserman, Zeich Tzadik L'Kodesh L'Brach, Zchus Yagim Aleinu, Hashem Yinkim Dama. He was murdered by the Nazis. And he was going to rough it in yeshiva by Rav Elchanan, by the famous Rav Elchanan. He says, I was a spoiled young boy. I liked it at home. We had a nice home. And I didn't have, an inclination to go to the Spartan living quarters of a yeshiva. But my brother was zealous, and he said, come, try it out. It's going to be to learn from one of the greatest people in the world. So he pushed me, and I went. I have to tell you, as an aside, that's why a bechor, a firstborn, gets privileges. Right? A firstborn gets a double portion. Why does a firstborn get privileges? Because a firstborn is a trailblazer. I'm a firstborn. Because I went to the yeshiva of Staten Island, now there's literally 3 generations of Weisses in the yeshiva of Staten Island. But I was the trailblazer. So here Rav Moshe Schwab admitted he wasn't going to go to the yeshiva. But his brother pushed him, come try it. If you don't like it, you can always go home. So he went. As soon as he came into the yeshiva and he took a look at it, he said, this is not for me. But his brother said to him, come learn a little bit. We'll go to the dining room. So he says, I came into the dining room. I took a look at the coarse tables and the rickety benches, and I looked at the shabby food, and I said, this is not for me. This is not for me. So, but I sat down at the table, and the cook, a woman, came out with a pot of tea. And one of the bachrim got up and jolted the tea, and the hot tea spilled over another boy. burning hot tea. And he said, I saw something that I couldn't believe. The boy clamped his lips, bit his lips, and didn't say anything, even though he was in excruciating pain. He didn't want to make the cook feel bad, and he didn't want to make the boy feel bad. And then, to my astonishment, while he was in obvious pain, he said to the cook, could you please bring out another pot of tea? It would really be wrong that everybody should lose out. Ramosha Schwab said, when I saw this, he said, this is the place that I gotta be. If people could learn how to control themselves so much that they could be in pain and not cry out, not to hurt another person's feeling, I gotta be here. Now, when this boy who got burnt went up to Shemayim, they're going to give him a percentage of all the thousands of Talmidim of Ramosha Schwab. Because it was his shutting his mouth that caused Ramosha Schwab to stay in yeshiva. That's Ochef Olav Piyu. That's the Umna Shel Peh. I have to tell you, my mother is listening, I have to tell you that this resonated by me. Because when I was barely a strapping boy of just 13, having skipped from 7th grade into the yeshiva of Staten Island, when I came to the yeshiva of Staten Island, I was a spoiled Austro-Hungarian prince. I lived in a pampered home with delicious meals, with a television. I come to yeshiva, there's 5 beds in a room, mattresses that were very thin, food that I wasn't used to. I want to tell you, I remember it was a Friday morning, and Rav Gershon Weiss gave a shir in Novi on Shimshon. He would later make it into the famous book Samson's Struggle. And I listened to a shir an hour, and it captivated me, and it riveted me, and I said, I got to hear more of this. I got to hear more of this. Even so, afterwards, I was homesick. A lot of people left the yeshiva. My mother used to come to the yeshiva and bring me food and clean by my bed. But that's what it means, ki ochaf alav piyu, to have a saddle on one's mouth. It's an amazing thing. The same thing is the famous, it's in the biography of Ramosha. They say somebody slammed the door on Ramosha's finger, the doors of a car. Ramosha held his mouth and didn't cry out, not to make the bacher feel bad. That's the power of the training of the mouth. Now, when it says V'espilim ben ba'ar, hargu b'charav, and aim numnosan shel elu ela b'peh, the Aleinu L'Shabach, Reb Zilberstein says that there are times that people come to him, a wife, a husband, with terrible shalom bayis problems. My husband is not treating me right. My wife is always screaming. My husband is putting me down. My wife is always complaining. He says a lot of times he doesn't know what to tell them. He doesn't have an answer. He says also he has another predicament where there is a family of Bali Tshuva, where they're both being chayzer b'tshuva. But one spouse wants to be quicker than the other. So one is ready not to smoke on Shabbos and not to have the television on Shabbos. And the other one isn't ready. And the one that's ready comes to him and says, what do I do? Rabbi Zilberstein said, a lot of times I don't have an answer. So you know what I tell them? I said, you know, when you tried whatever you know how to do, and the situation is not getting better, then the answer is to pray. And to say to Hashem, Hashem, I did mine. Now I need your help. And we say it in davening. Ki kel shemei tfilas kol pe'amcha Yisrael barachamim. Ve'ein tfilasei chazeres reikam. Hashem doesn't turn people back empty-handed. Person has to say, that's our umnus, that's our craft. Say, Rabbi Shalom, I did mine. I tried, I used my toolbox. I don't know what to do. I need your help. And Hashem helps. Now, Reb Levi Yitzchak Medichev says that it's a very powerful prayer to say, Hashem, you know, on my own, I don't think I have enough schusim. But you know what helped me in the schus of my wife? He says that's what Yitzchak did. Vayeter Yitzchak laHashem l'noichach ishtoi. Yitzchak prayed to Hashem opposite his wife. He said, Rabbi Shalom, look, I don't know if I have enough schusim, but I have a wife, Rivka, that grew up amongst Rishaim, amongst Lavan, amongst Besuel, and she didn't learn. I grew up with Avram and Sarah, but she grew up with a murderous bunch. And look at what tzedekah she is. Help me in the schus of my wife. A wife could say, Hashem, I might not be worthy, but help me in the schus of my husband. The Reb Levi Yitzchak Medichev says this is all part of the umnus of the peh. However, I can't talk to you about this without sharing with you the thought of the Chavetz Chaim. Einum nosen shel elu ela bepeh. The Chavetz Chaim says, when the Torah reveals to us that our profession is our mouth, the Chavetz Chaim says that a person that's a professional takes care of his tools very, very carefully. You know, there was a shop that we used, a car mechanic that we used in Staten Island. It was a very, 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 that's where my father went, and for many years I used that shop. And the mechanics in that shop, each mechanic had his lock station with his tools, his drill and all of his tools. And he kept his tools with pride. He sharpened them, he shined them, he cleaned them. A moyel. He's very careful with his yizemel, with his knife. A sheichet has a chalaf. He has to make sure it doesn't have the smallest pegima. doesn't have a blemish. He has to take very good care of his equipment. A professional, a dentist has his equipment. He's always sterilizing it. He's always taking care of it. A professional takes care of their equipment. And therefore the Chofetz Chaim says, when we learn that our umnus is the mouth, it means that we have to be very careful to take care of our tool. That means that we have a mouth. The mouth should never say oinas devarim, hurtful words. The mouth should, God forbid, never say nivel peh, any vulgarity. The mouth shouldn't lie. The mouth shouldn't say bad about others. That's our umnus. That's our. Now, it's interesting. We won't speak about it tonight. It's another whole shir. But why are there people that whatever they say, like Rav Chaim, his buah, his bracha atzlach, he didn't even have to say, he just said the abbreviation. Just saying the abbreviation was so powerful. It says, Lo yachal devarai kikol hayotzim mepiv yaseh. Lo yachal devara means that a person that doesn't make his words chulin, but every word is precious, then the Rebbeinu Shalom says, by you every word is precious, kikol hayotzim mepiv yaseh. Whatever comes out of your mouth, I'm going to do. That's the way it was by tzaddikim. And when a person sharpens his clay umnus, the mouth is his clay umnus, then that mouth is very powerful. Now, I just want to share with you a word. Remember I told you that Rabbeinu, there's two Rishonim that are amazing at uncovering secrets of the Torah. One is the Rekeach, and one is Rabbeinu Ephraim. Rabbeinu Ephraim says an incredible thing on the parasha. You know, Bilam went to collect the money because, you know, they hired him to cause damage to Klal Yisrael, and he succeeded. When all else failed, when he tried to curse, and the curse boomeranged, and it turned out to a blessing. So Bilam said, look, before I leave, I'm going to give you an eitzah. Give you an eitzah. And he gave them a scheme. You know, Klal Yisrael likes a sale. So he says you should set up a bazaar. You know, Klal Yisrael likes garage sales. They like bazaars. You should put an ugly woman in the front, and then a very, very pretty woman within. And this was before they decreed against the wine of Goyim. The ugly woman offered some wares, and the young woman on the inside, they wouldn't have gone if there was a seductive woman, but there was an ugly woman. But then a seductive woman said, I'll give you a better price. And she invited him into an inner room and gave some wine. You're a good customer, here's some wine. And when his head was already spinning, she said, she solicited him. So he was already spinning. So she said, but I won't submit to you unless you do the Avodah Zarah of Pa'ar. What was Avodah Zarah of Pa'ar? The worship of Pa'ar was that they had to defecate and go to the bathroom in front of Pa'ar. And she said, what are you worried about? It's anyway, it's just, for you, it's just making fun of the idol. But the halacha is, since that's the way to serve the idol, it was forbidden. 24,000 people followed this, and they died because of Bilam. So Bilam was coming to collect payment for the 24,000 Jews that he succeeded in killing. And when he came, Pinchas killed him. And there's a whole story behind that. Again, we're not going to go into it in length, but Bilam knew how to fly. So when Pinchas came against him, Bilam flew up in the air. Pinchas used the Shem HaMeforish and flew after him. And he succeeded in killing Bilam. So says the Rabbeinu Ephraim, this is alluded to in the pasuk, Yesh derech yosher lifnei ish v'achareh darchei mavas. There's a way that looks straight before a man, but its end is death. So he says, Yesh derech yosher is soif tevis schar. Yesh is shin, derech is chaf, and yosher is reish, that's schar. So Bilam went to get his schar, his payment. How much? So the first letters, Yesh is Yud is 10, Derech is 4, is 14, and Yosher is another 10, is 24. He came to get for the 24,000. But what was the end? The Achrei Darchei Mavos, he went to his death. And that's what it says, that a man's feet take him to his death. Ragloi debar inesh, Inon haraven loy. They're responsible for him, and they take him to the place where he's going to die. I just want to share with you something that I saw about the control of the mouth. I saw that Reb Chatzkel Abramsky, Zech Tzadik Lebracha Zchus Yagen Aleinu, 1 year, during Aseret Yemei Tshuva, he didn't talk to anybody. People would come with shilas, he didn't talk to anybody. So most people thought that he was practicing like the Bali Musa did in those days. They had a Tanis Dibber. Some people fast by not eating, some people fast by not talking. But then they saw that he didn't even talk in Torah. So they didn't know what it was about. After Yom Kippur, he apologized to those people that he didn't talk to. And he said, the doctors told me that I might have a hard time fasting. And they told me that talking takes up a lot of energy. So I decided not to talk for 10 days in order to preserve my energy that I should be able to fast. That's achafalav piyu. That's another way of having a saddle on the mouth. And by the way, there's people, women are also supposed to fast, especially Tisha B'Av. The people, they think that they do things, and then when they don't feel well, they have a heter to eat. You have to learn from this lesson from Rav Chatzkel that you have to think not to bring yourself to a position where you won't be able to fast. As a parent of new children, my first Rebbetzin passed away. I married again. B'liya and Hara, a very, very special second Rebbetzin. And now I have children, new children. So first of all, I don't call them stepchildren. I call them new children. I don't think it's nice to say stepchildren. It has a negative connotation. I call them new children. But there's a very interesting implication of this in this week's Parsha. It says that Bilti, we know that the generation died in the desert, Bilti Kolev ben Yefuna HaKenazi, except for Kolev ben Yefuna HaKenazi. Now what does that mean? He's the son of Yefuna. What's Kenazi? So Rabbeinu Bachya says that Kolev's mother married Yefuna. and had Kalev. Then Yefunah died, and she married the very chashuv Knaz. Knaz was the father of Asniel ben Knaz. So Yefunah was Kalev's natural father, biological father. Kenaz was his stepfather. And you see that the Torah gives mention of both the father and the stepfather. Kalev ben Yefunah Kenazi. It's a lesson from the Torah. I have to know that in a second marriage, sometimes the children are very foolish and they don't treat the step-parent properly. And sometimes they're very misguided because they think that it's a loyalty to their first parent. It's completely keneged HaTorah. It's completely the atzas hayetzer. This has to be said. First of all, we know that it's a chazal. It says, Kabed es avicha ve'es imecha, es avicha l'rabbeis eshes avicha, the wife of your father. That's a stepmother. Ve'es imecha l'rabbeis bal imecha. Bal imecha is a stepfather. So there's a mitzvah d'oraisa to honor. Not only that, but we find an amazing thing about Yitzchak. It says, Yitzchak ba mi be'er lachai roi. Yitzchak came from be'er lachai roi. Says Rashi, what was Yitzchak doing? Yitzchak was going to bring back Hagar to his father. This is after Sarah Imenu died. He brought Hagar. Now, Yitzchak had a mother like Sarah, and he's bringing back Hagar, Keturah, who his mother threw out of the house? Torah is telling us that it's not disloyalty to a parent, that a parent should be not alone. A line is azoivi ashtan. The Baba Rebbe says, it only says loy toiv once in the Torah, loy toiv ve'yoisa adam levada. There are children that break up the second marriages of their parents. And they're going to have to be accountable for this. It's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing. Now that doesn't mean that there aren't situations where there could be a step-parent that's not nice to the children. That happens. That happens. And when that happens, then Rabbanim have to get involved and step in and make sure that that injustice should not be. But the idea that children are defending the honor of their parent is not a Torah thing. You know, Ruvain made this mistake when he thought he was defending the honor of his mother, and he moved his father's bed out of the tent of Bilhah into the tent of Leah. He said, it's one thing that my mother should have to play second fiddle to Rachel, but my mother should have to play second fiddle to Bilhah? So on his own, he went and he moved his father's bed from the tent of Bilhah to the tent of Leah. What Reuven lost is so gigantic, we can't even imagine. Because he did that, he lost the kahuna, and he lost the monarchy. It says, Pachas Kamayim al Toiser. Yeser Se'eser Yeser. You were supposed to have the Nesias Kapayim. You were supposed to have Ois. You were supposed to be Melech. You lost it. You lost the Nesias Kapayim to Levi. You lost the Malucha to Yehuda. Because in Reuven's mind, he was honoring the honor of his mother. Can't make these cheshbainis. They're not Torah-dik cheshbainis. I want to conclude with a great miracle that happened in this week's Parsha. Rabbeinu Bachya says, in the miraculous history of Klal Yisrael, in the miraculous annals of Jewish history, this will go down as one of the greatest miracles of our history. Before I do, I want to thank people who are watching and listening world over. This is a world share. And I want to ask people to participate in supporting the share. If you would like to sponsor a share, 718-916-3100. You could text me. It's $3.60 to sponsor a share that's heard by, for sure, 1,000 people all over the world. So again, text 718-916-3100 or email to rmmwsi@aol.com. That's Rabbi Moshe Meir Weiss, Staten Island, @aol.com. That's also the Zelle information if you want to Zelle to the share. It's rmmwsi@aol.com. We know that Moshe Rabbeinu was given a last charge. Nikoin Nikmas B'nai Yisrael Me'esa Midyan, they caused the death of so many Jews. We said last week that not only the 24,000, but also the Yerushalmi says in Sanhedrin that Moshe told each dayan to kill 2 Jews, and there were 78,000 dayanim, so that's another 156,000. 156,000 plus 24,000 is 180,000 Yidden that were killed because of the scheming of the Midianites. So he said, Moshe Rabbeinu, Nekaim Nikmas B'nai Yisrael Me'esa Midyanim, and afterwards you will be gathered onto your people. You see, Bilam had to be killed before Moshe Rabbeinu would pass away, because remember we learned that Loikam Navi K'Moshe, that's by Yisrael, but there was by the Goyim, because always Zeh L'Umah Zeh Asa Elikim. There's always an equal Kayach Kedusha and Kayach Toma. So Moshe Rabbeinu was the foil of Bilam. So if Moshe Rabbeinu would pass away, Bilam can't be around, because then there would be no foil. There would be no Zeh L'Umah Zeh. So before Moshe Rabbeinu would pass away, Bilam had to be removed. So we went to war with 12,000 people. It says each Shevet gave 1,000. Says Rabbeinu Bachya, it was amazing. V'loi nifkad mimenu ish. In fighting the hundreds of thousands of militia of Midian, not one Jewish soldier died. V'loi nifkad mimenu ish. And the odds were Rabbi Miyad Matim, 12,000 against hundreds of thousands, and not one. Not like by Chanukah was also Rabbi Miyad Matim. But many of the Chashmonaim died. Many of them died. Mattos died. Many of them died. But nobody died. V'lo nifkad mimenu ish. And the Gemara tells us, it's a Gemara in Saita, On Daf Yudalid, the Gemara says, because they didn't have sin. These 12,000 didn't have sin. Yoleinu L'Shabeach suggests that they were especially righteous in Bein Adam L'Chaveiroi. For example, do you know that the Balaturim points out that the Nesiim didn't go with the fight? Pinchas was the general, but the Nasi of each Shevet didn't go. Normally the Nasi went to battle. But because they didn't want Shevet Shimon to feel bad, because their Nasi was killed when Pinchas killed, right, Zimri, so therefore, in order that they shouldn't feel bad, none of the Nesiim went, or even more than that. It says in Rashi that of the 1,000, Shevet Levi was one of the 1,000. So then which Shevet didn't go? It says Ephraim, Shevet Ephraim didn't participate. Why didn't Shevet Ephraim participate? Because Yeshua was from Ephraim. And they didn't want people to think that they wanted the war to be over, so Moshe Rabbeinu should die, so their man Yeshua should take over. So they didn't fight. This was just sensitivities of Klal Yisrael. I want to thank you very much for joining us and wish you all a very good Shabbos.